So very different than poetry. Very different than poetry. Because it really can bring people together. Anybody else?
I thought that your story resonated with me because I saw it as a bonding experience. And for me, I had that bonding experience with my grandmother, but it was when she had long, beautiful hair, and every night she let me take her hair down and brush it and braid and play it, and we talk and joke, and that was really my bonding moment with my grandmother. It's beautiful.
The story. Another beautiful story. And it's two very, very quick stories. Those are stories. And these are the stories we need to be telling one another. Because how many of you have bonding stories with your father, your mom, your grandparent? Can I just see by raising your hand? So Sandy's story resonated, didn't it? Well, what about Mark's story? Mark, you did the story on the
Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh.
And my nephew, who thought that Uncle Mark was inside Winnie the Pooh. Out of the mouths of babes.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's funny because it reminded me of a story that my sister just told me about my nephew. You know, it's like my sister tries to make learning experiences for my nephew when they go shopping to the supermarket. But you know, kids are sort of naive and they don't understand sort of the concept of reality. So my nephew was in the supermarket going shopping and my sister has him go pick out stuff, you know, like get the bread or get the milk. So he was going down the aisle and then he was looking for the bread and he would say, "Bread, where are you? Bread." I mean, literally like the bread's gonna come along. But it was so funny, so the baker was in the bakery area where he was, and the baker saw this and was just chuckling to himself. So the baker said, "Here I am." It's so hilarious, the idea of, you know, how kids are so naive, but literally, you know, he thought the bread would come walking to him. And, you know, it was just funny. So it connected me to the story of my nephew and my sister as well.
How old is he?
My nephew's about four. He just turned 4. So
These children nowadays are pretty deep, aren't they? They have some stories.
yes, they do.
You know what's interesting about that story, now this feels like tag time, is there's an African folk tale that's about things talking. And it's about a yam talking and a rock talking, and so it challenges that notion that only people talk. And I know many of us, maybe I'm the only person who has talked to things that didn't necessarily talk. We name things like cars and guitars, so I think maybe your little nephew could hear something the adults weren't hearing.
Yeah, I feel that way about schizophrenics. I don't have a problem with them personally, because I feel as if they're in a whole other dimension, a whole other realm, and, you know, just need to leave alone. So, anybody else have experiences like that they'd like to share? Yes.
This man right here. I've had the Richard Simmons experience. About 22 years ago, well, my son's 22, my youngest, so it was about 20 years ago. First, let me say, I've always battled with my weight also. My mother put me on my first diet when I was 13, and I've been yo-yo dieting ever since. But I decided I stayed up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, Richard Simmons deal meal. I gotta have it. So I called, I got the cards, and I did, you know, I got the tapes, and I did all this, and I got 3 kids. And I got my second son the first was born the day before my first son's first birthday. So I got a 1-year-old, a less than 1-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And I'm stretched out. I'm like, oh, I got them all down. They're quiet. I'm just gonna take a minute. And I lay down and the phone rings and it's like, Jackie Skelton, this is Richard. I'm like, Richard who? Richard Simmons. Have you been doing your tapes? Have you exercised today? And I was like, who is this really? So I know about that call from Richard Simmons at the most inopportune moment.
So he called your house?
Yeah. Yeah, at that time, he was calling different people that had ordered the deal meal.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, very good person. Somebody needs to remember. When we're trying to sell something to somebody.
That was the inside track why he was such the thing.
Yeah, everybody knows Richard Simmons' story too. I mean, I love all of the stories, but that one was hilarious. That one was really funny. Anyone else has a story to tell? Yes, Sandy.
I just want to say about Sean's story. You know, you get involved in your life, and I had sponsored refugees for years, and you know this and this and that. And then just this last week, I had a lady tell me about this young girl who's a foster care girl, but now she's of age. She's 18, so you know when you become of age, then see you later. And so now she's in difficult circumstances. And so this lady, friend at church, she'd heard about it, and she wanted me to go down with her. I said, oh yeah, honey, I know right where that is. I said, good, let's go. And so we go over there, and eventually we took the girl out, and then we took her home. And when my girlfriend got back in the car, she just started bawling. And I said, you got a problem with this, sweetheart? And she said, I took my kids to Mexico because I thought, we could help in Mexico. And here it is. And I said, I could take you for the next 6 weeks, and we would not even begin to scratch the surface of people that live this way. And she just said, this is a life changer. This is a huge life changer. And I thought if I could just get every little 40-year-old white girl, bring them over to different parts of town, because it's just not one of the places. So when he said that, I felt very positive, and that we do our part to inform other people to be of service to their community. And I think that's so valuable.
I think that is very valuable. And one of the things I appreciated that you said, Sean, was you said, I've been to the poorest section, and I've been to the wealthiest, or the richest section, and it's not always money. And that's the truth, because sometimes people have all the money, and their spirit is so poor. Whereas you find, I've done a lot of traveling this year, and traveled to different countries in Africa, and though there may not have been a lot of money, there's a lot of spirit, and a lot of love, a lot of culture. So it's not always about the money, really. So it's good to take the children everywhere. Take them to the rich sections, take them to the poor sections. Yeah, there's a story, and I'm not going to tell it real quick, and some of you may have even heard it. It was about a young, very wealthy boy, and his father told him to just go out, because he felt like he was so entitled, and he told him he wanted him to go over to that poor, to the rancher's home, because the rancher didn't have a lot of money. His family was very poor, had about 6 or 7 kids, and so the boy spent some time over there, and he really felt very full from what he saw at the home. And when he came back to the house, the father said, well, did you learn the lesson? Pretty well, well, did you learn your lesson? And he said, yeah. I learned about sharing. I learned about people eating together at the table. I learned about love. I learned that we are very poor, but yet they were very rich, based on how they interface and how they interacted with one another. So I really love that story, because I too have spent time at shelters and feeding, so that's really a wonderful experience. Anybody else? Yes.
Your story reminded me of a story in New York and Harlem, where mosques and churches got together. It was Thanksgiving to feed the homeless. So you had these, and we cooked. It wasn't government cheese and this and that. We cooked like we cooked for our own families. And we had these long lines of people, some older, some younger, male, of course, female. And there was a sort of like a sad stare when they were online waiting to be fed. But I noticed one young man, he had to be in his 20s, and he was sort of somber. After he ate, he had like an attitude like, hey, I gotta go get my crew now. Let's serve some food. Oh, man, this is good. And it made me think about richness. Because although they came and they were in need, it was something about, and it was good food, by the way, but it was something about the way they were served. And you said they listened, the woman listened to the young man for the blueberry and the chocolate muffin. That made me think about how we served them, and they felt the respect, so much so that they wanted to go get some people who were also homeless and were in need of good food. So thank you for reminding me of that.
I just wanted to piggyback on what you're talking about, that that I think in our current culture, it's very easy to demonize the other. And it's easy to say all poor people, and it's also easy to say all rich people. And both of those, in any of our religious traditions or not religious traditions, know that demonizing the other based on stuff is wrong. Evaluating the other based on stuff is wrong, because I know rich people, and I know poor people. You know, and it's about the humanity. So I just wanted to kind of latch on to that, because again, it is easy, I know, you know, because people would say to me, oh, you're working way up in there, and and all those people and all that money. It's like, hold on, these are human beings that may or may not have money in their pocket, not based on where they live. And some of those folks up there, when I said I need, the pile of cash appeared. And those of us in human services, anybody in this room, know that no matter how much we want to talk about it, sometimes that pile of cash does need to appear. So I just wanted to kind of latch over that.
That's absolutely true, and I'd like to have the number of that person.
Yeah. Still in here?
And that is very true. There was something that you said, Cheryl, that I wanted to throw out, and that was the word listen. You said it in your story. Your story was about listening. How he was so surprised that this woman listened to him, and she went to look for the chocolate donut, which was very beautiful. How many of you find yourself not listening when people are talking? Is that how you? Everybody listening now? But is this true? You find yourself, let me see by show of hands, how many of you are really good listeners? All the time. So good listener listens all. Go ahead, Tom. No, that's it. And raise your hand.
Oh, I'm supposed to say something?
No, you don't have to. If
She
you
was in
want to.
response to your question.
So, yeah, you raise your hand saying that you are a good listener and you listen all the time. That is a skill. Listening is a skill. As a matter of fact, they tell you in storytelling, every good storyteller, if bad, good, or anybody, we need story listeners. That's what we need. Felicia?
I feel that I'm a very good listener. In fact, sometimes when I leave situations, I feel like, wow, I listened so much, which is great because you get to learn a lot. But I didn't get a chance to share part of me because I was so busy listening, right? But then sometimes I'm somewhere else when I'm supposed to be listening too, right? Yeah, but for the most part, I'm a great listener because I like to learn about people's experiences and then from that learn how I can impart what it is that I can offer them from that. But sometimes I feel like it's to my disadvantage because then I didn't get to share part of my experience.
So there's got to be balance, right?
Yeah.
You got to listen and you have to share as well. That's important, which is what storytelling is about.
One of the things I was aware of in Sean's story is the man who he was dealing with was telling himself the story. Beggars can't be choosers. His story had an effect on him, on how he acted and responded. So his story in his mind that he was telling himself is, I can't have this, I can't ask for this. Beggars can't be choosers. And by that interaction with that young woman, she helped him change his own story and his own view of himself and what he could or could not do. And for me, that's one of the most powerful pieces of storytelling, is how when we do listen to each other and we interact, that our stories can connect with each other and help make positive change.
Absolutely. Which is, in Africa, that was one of the main purposes of storytelling. And that was to impart the lesson, to teach what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to interface with family, with community. And that was really a beautiful thing. Now, let me ask the children, which story resonated with you? And I'm looking at you two, as one of the youth. Which of the stories resonated most with you?
Winnie Pooh.
What about you, Asante?
Winnie
You like the Winnie Pooh story? You can relate to that one, right? Because you know the stories of Winnie Pooh. What did you like this? Can I ask?
already do know, it's just trying to sometimes say it. It's difficult for a lot of us, right? What about you, Sid? Yeah.
I don't know what your question is.
You know, sometimes it's that piece that is familiar to you that begins that connection. I have been in England several times and told stories, and one of the stories I tell is about how many people are familiar with Babar the elephant? And they were familiar with that, with Babar, and all of a sudden they were just listening and leaning forward because they already had a connection. And so you know how sometimes we connect with people because of different things, because maybe we live in the same city, or we came from Chicago or New York, but now that story is about something I know something about, that can make a connection.
And also
My
marketing
cousin
about
lived
that
in
too.
Chicago.
See? How wonderful that is.
Have you been to Chicago?
No,
No, not yet.
after I was little, I had been to Chicago.
Oh, so you have been to Chicago. Nice. So, but the question was, what part of that story really made you like it?
The middle of the thing after he was having the math thing.
Big, and he had the purple eyes. This is really good. What is your name? Kelsey. Kelsey, what about you? Do you want to share anything?
My favorite story was probably the driving one, because I want to drive.
So you need to.
Yes, but I can't. I have like 2 more years to go until I can start driving. But it's just, I thought it was really good.
You like that?
Come on, we'll go out to the country.
You know, Mom, I used to take my son when he was little, driving in the parking lot, and he was probably 13, 11, 12, something like that. But I would take him in the parking lot at night. It was very, very late, and there are no cars in the parking lot, and he would just have to drive in a circle, and I'd be right there, real slow. So that might be a thought.
Just saying.
I'm just saying, you know. Now, of course, if you're driving a tractor trailer. But it's just a thought, you know. It could be fun just to learn. Anyone else? That's the story to tell.
That's kind of what you were saying. Actually, it's a brother story. It was something my brother told me years back. He was always like the brainchild in the family, his oldest son, and he expected to do well, and he did. Graduated college at 21, got a good corporate job. He took a trip to Gambia in Africa. These guys didn't have to afford, had BMW, bought his little flat apartment, went to Gambia, and he came back and I met him at the airport because I didn't drive, I couldn't drive, so I just made him to, because he wasn't going to give me his car. So I met him at the airport to carry his bags, of course, being the younger brother. And so we get back to the house, he goes, Roger, that trip changed my life. He goes, the people there were so poor because they don't have food, don't have nothing, because they're giving to me. Because they're giving me things. They invite me to their homes. He goes, they don't have hardly plates, don't have chairs. They invite you to their home. They treat me like they know you like you're a long lost family member. And he goes, this is what life is about. He goes, the people they got nothing, but they're so happy.
Yes.
They're so happy. He goes, I'm here thinking that, boy, I've got it made. And so I realized I don't have nothing. And he ends up, he quits the job, goes back to college because he was interested in sports. And to this day, he's always been he's basically a key fitness instructor. He's got a PhD in business, and he's a fitness instructor because that's what he does. I said to him, he's in great shape. He's 2 years old, in great shape. I said, you see, you're still doing this? He said, if you're happy, he goes, you can't, if you're happy doing what you're doing. And he probably could make him 4 or 5 times the money in days, man, probably more than that. But, just touching what you're saying about how, having money doesn't necessarily make you happy. And you make the decision to face it, 21, 22. So, I see him last year, and I wish I had his body.
the stories, but have you received or gotten any stories or learned any stories from travel?
So I traveled extensively, and you know, a lot of times it'll be because I want to see something or experience something in the country, like going to Uganda to see the mountain gorillas. And I always get surprised because what I bring back is the humanity. People being kind, people being open, people sharing. When we went to Uganda, the day we arrived,
When I see the kids sip and look. Now, I come from New York from the 60s, I remember about the sip and look, you know, I did. But this African woman, she looked at me and she said, don't you dare judge. Now, in my heart, I wasn't judging. I promise you, I wasn't judging. But I may have had a look of disbelief because they was adolescents. And this woman said to me, she said, in order for these children to survive, they have to do this in order to keep their sanity. Because within the culture of street children, there's a lot of brutality. They get bullied by the older children, their monies get taken. So there's a lot of culture in it. So what I did was, I began to befriend the children, and I would take them and feed them. I started out with 2. Before we left, we had a whole table full, about 6. So much so that the hotel that we stayed in, the owner of the restaurant did not charge me for the last 2 nights that I was feeding those children. Then what I did, just to satisfy myself, coming from the field of social work, I went online at the library and I researched to find out what government agency is overlooking these street children. And I knew about Mandela, and I knew about what he was doing around that time, trying to get monies from all over the world to help a lot of causes there in South Africa. Well, I did find an organization called Child Welfare, which was beautiful for me because at that time I worked for Child Welfare in New York, which is a governing agency, changed names over the years, BCW, ACS, but it's the agency that governs children, protect children, foster care children, children who are abused and neglected. So I called them and I asked for audience. You know, I'm American, you know, they love America, so I put on my American professional voice, and I asked for audience. And what happened was, they granted me the audience, and what I learned is that it was not a governmental agency. It was an agency that was founded by women in the turn of the century who had a need for helping children. And I will tell you guys, do I share the story every opportunity I give? Because one of the ways it changed my life is that when I went back to New York, my children was 10 and 4. And I told them, we're not wasting anything. Y'all don't want to eat the food on the table? We're not scrapping into the garbage cans no more. I will be the human garbage. I seen children starving to the point where they were selling their bodies for food. And this is what travel does for us. It opens our eyes. It allows us to see. Yes.
I totally agree with that. I'm Kate, so I'm with some of the stories. Is that I've only traveled a little bit, and when I did travel, I saw those same things, and then I came home, and now I teach with a group called Phonetic Spit, and we teach in high schools all around the valley, right? So we teach in high schools that have a lot of wealth invested in them, and we teach at high schools that have almost nothing invested in them. And we also teach at some teen shelters, different teen organizations. And what I've found is that it is so astonishing, and my life has changed that way every day that it happens here. And just because it's not in mass numbers, there are more subtle ways that our youth suffer in the same way. And not to say that it's right. So what I've noticed more than anything is that pain is relative. Whether or not you have money or you don't have money, pain is pain and experience. But privilege is very real. And and privilege affects pain. And I work with kids. I was working with kids before I got here, and getting them to write poems and stuff like that, and they just didn't care, because to them poems were important. They're like, "Do you have $1?" I was like, "No." They're like, "Then I'm not writing a poem," because they do live on the street, because they're homeless, because all these things. And we're lucky in the United States that we have a certain level of privilege, right? We have a lot of, and you've seen, I imagine a lot of you work for agencies that try to help that problem. But I just think so often, and especially people where I come from, in like the suburbs, like a lot of privilege, they think that they have to travel to go see that it's something that happens to the other, that it's something that's far away from them, and it's
Do
not.
you think that's a part of the problem of the media and the way the media handles situations?
I definitely-
That if you watch TV, you'll have one perception, just like many people, I think, in the worst countries in the world, people want to leave those countries to come to America because of the image we portray. To your point, you don't have to drive very far. You probably don't have to leave your zip code to see that reality.
Yeah, and I really agree that you don't, and not to say that like leaving the country and seeing those things isn't.
No, I think they're
Yeah.
equal.
Yeah.
It's astonishing when you go to Africa and you see that. I know like some kids in Africa still glue because it curbs their hunger appetite, so they can function and do the street hustle. But I've seen TV programs on PBS where this teacher was trying to teach this girl and said, "You've got to get to school. Your #1 job is to be here on time." She told the teacher, "My #1 job is to eat today. That's and that's a whole different paradigm. And the world sometimes doesn't connect to that.
Yeah, I need point of clarification. I wasn't suggesting that you travel so you can see that.
I didn't mean to come across that way, because I've traveled too and like thought the same thing. Yeah, no, I think that's all really, really great. And it's just so amazing how they highlight each other, rather. They interact with each other, the traveling experience match with home. And I think that's probably why one and the other makes us feel so much. Is because we wouldn't think that is so painful if we didn't know what it is to be invisibilized, because everybody knows that to a certain degree. We all wouldn't know what it's like to be not enough, that there are moments in our life where we had to do something that we didn't want to do. And so then when you see somebody doing it every day, all the time, for their life, that's why we're like,
Perhaps the distance we travel, perhaps the distance we travel doesn't have to be 1,000 miles. It could be 10 feet. It can.
But I think the 1,000-mile trips are very valid, because when you plan, I know when I plan a vacation, I pick a date, time, and an itinerary, and there's a financial effort associated with that. So when you go, you don't want to, quote unquote, go into a hotel where there's no wait staff and there's no cook and the doors don't have locks. You plan to not be in that environment. So you kind of get in what I call a vacation frame of mind. And it doesn't take very much to get off the beaten path by a block and go, oh, wow. I had a whole different, I've left places and go, that's a great place. And then, get online and do some research and kind of go, it's that bad? And they're hiding it.
I think it's interesting, and this is good because it's not good or bad. It's important that we point out these sort of competing stories that happen at the same time. Because no story exists in isolation. And even when we started with the Story Slam, there was this sense that the story connected to a nephew, the story connected to an experience that involved other people. What's interesting is the acknowledgement that there are these narratives that we, whoever we are, create for other people, and they create for us. Because it's very easy to drive down a street, to walk down a street, and to look at an outside of something and then tell that person's story or that family's story and not know. Just as we're being looked at in the same way that you go to zoos and you look at animals, and then you want what the animals are looking at when they're looking at us. So that's what's interesting, that people, we don't often self-reflect to see the extent to which we may be writing correctly or incorrectly someone else's story. But the point you're talking about is that the story connects us to somebody else.
Yeah, it's a journey. Everyone's on a journey, and that's what I like about the 3 stories. And tell it from here to here, and how that here to here affected the person they were trying to, your nephews,
you know, the kid telling you the story, so we all got a journey.
Yeah, or even his brother bringing that, what he took from other people, so
Exactly.
bringing it back, how important. It's the- You know,
Yeah.
it's just like, it happens on a micro level and a macro level.
Any other stories?
I kind of like to share something. My name is Jenny Strickland, and the last 2 summers I worked at the Phoenix Center for the Arts in charge of their youth summer program for the arts. And it's really fun. I don't know if anyone here has been to Phoenix Center for the Arts, but it is at 3rd Street and basically Roosevelt, so it is inner city. And we had students that run the entire spectrum of privilege. I had a 6-year-old that came in with an iPad and was teaching me things. I was like, how do you, but.
Since I was 4.
Yeah, exactly. This is the new level. He's like, I just got a raise. So.
Yeah.
But younger than us definitely get it.
Yeah, so hashtag is like you tag something on the internet, and it's first world problems is this phrase that is the second largest hashtag on the internet right now. So that means it is the second largest thing being
Most talked about.
most talked about thing on the web right now. And it's interesting because it's a part of this conversation because it was originally a phrase that started, and I remember it was like 2 years ago maybe, when it started, 2 years ago, when it was like really like that's what people around us were saying, and it wasn't then what it is now. Originally it was like, oh, my car died, and I was like, first world problems, like, right, like, at first it was an admittance to like, my life's not so bad.
Oh, okay.
That's what it started out as.
And it's flipped though?
It flipped. It's like, it was like, oh, first world problems, right, which meant
I should be so lucky as to have a car
right,
and have
like,
a problem.
I shouldn't be complaining really because I have a car, like, the privilege.
And so now it's.
And then it got blasted, and now it's become like, you know, there's.
So there are latitudes to change.
It's a latitude of change, but how people have used that, how we can take that and turn them into different stories is really valid, which is why stuff like this is so important. There's an organization that is that's working to get clean water in Haiti, in certain parts of Haiti, and they have taken those hashtags, actual hashtag phrases from Twitter, tweets. I'm learning all this, and they put it in a commercial, so they have young people in Haiti reading to the camera these tweets from the U.S. And so you have a young man that has no clean water source, and they're asking for donations, and so he reads a tweet to the camera that says like, I hate when I forget my iPhone when I go to the bathroom, or like, I hate when my mom can't pick me up from soccer practice, or like even just, you know, really things that we take for granted. Yeah, and it's not necessarily to bash the phrase, but it's, and I was listening to an interview by the guy who started it, and he said it's not necessarily that like, to say like, oh, that's a bad phrase, how could you do that? But like, you see how people could do that, because it came out of privilege. It came out of people with privilege acknowledging for maybe the first time in a long time. Like, be thankful for that phrase. At first, that was like, yeah, like, kids not, like, realizing.
They just being happy they have a car.
Right, yeah, like, the evolution of it, and, like, this culture of hashtag and tweet, and then what it can become, and he said, but the story that was told within a minute and a half of this commercial to get donations, this blurb, was, A, give us money, because we need to get clean water to Haiti, but it was also B, think twice again when you say that.
Do you think that's because we don't have more oral stories, or do you think that I mean, this story slam you're doing, that if we had more of that, then maybe we wouldn't have those?
This is just one man's opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure it's about if we have more stories. I think it's more about what Fatima said about listening. The more we listen. I wonder if you're all aware of what has happened here this evening. Many things. If you look around the room, we're quite a diverse group right here. Ages, cultures, many, many things. I did not, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Nadine.
Nadine. I did not go to Africa with Nadine and experience what she experienced, but because of her story, I've experienced part of what she did. Because of everyone's stories. Now, you experienced these younger kids that you were working with. Now, I've experienced your experience and theirs. If you remember those who were here at the beginning, Sean looked at Neil and said, we have to get together. And Neil said, is there a story there? And Sean said, we will create one. So the power of story is to connect us through so many different levels, because we can't experience all the things in the world. But what Nadine experienced of the story of those children affected her. And now we know both of those. We know the story of the children, and we know her story and how it affected her. And your own children, there's another story of how they responded to your, we're not going to waste anything. So there are so many different levels. And I think what we have to begin to do is, because we all tell stories, as Fatima said. You know, we tell them at the dinner table, let me tell you what happened at school today, or let me tell you what happened at the supermarket. It's that listening and accepting the fact that we will make a connection. We all have the stories. I don't think we necessarily need more. I think we need to listen to each other.
But that's just in line with what you were saying. Actually, could this help us to get that, to get there? And one thing, I can say, what is your name? Kate. Kate. I can say that as an adult, as an elder, I am so happy that we have youth like you. Because you will tell the story. And you say you're part of a poetry group, a phonetic spit. So you're part of that group, which means that you are writing, you are learning, you're creating stories, and you're telling the stories, and you're working with the young people. So thank you for what you're doing, and continue, because you will reach those privileged kids. And let me tell you, you don't have to have money to be privileged either. Or act like you got some entitlement thing going with you. My kids were poor. And they thought that they still think, and they still poor, and they're wrong. So we won't go back.
See, there's a story there too.
She has a great mentor in that group. You know Tomas?
Oh!
Yeah, I work, I'm like.
At the Boys and Girls Club?
No, so Tomas and Merlin are the founders of Phonetic Spit, and then I'm a teaching artist with them. We're like 3 musketeers, and we teach in 7 different high schools.
Wonderful young man.
I used to work with Tomas.
Listen, I just wanted to say about our idea of communication. We have a wonderful gentleman at South Mountain Community College this week. His name is Don Davis. He's an elderly gentleman, and he's written many books and conversations. And one thing he said to the young people this week that came to your story, the college age kids, was tweets, and she just proved it 100 times over, and getting on Facebook and watching TV and watching movies. None of these are communication. They are presentations. And our whole lives are now overwhelmed with presentations.
Bias presentations.
Presentations, and in the world of communication, welcome to PBS, you know what I mean? And that's not, it's because it doesn't have that relationship. So it's just the word commune, community, communicable, you know, it already says it needs more than one, our community needs more than one thing happening. And that is when we speak, because we are listening, and that's what's missing in our society today, is our children. That's why they had to start preschools and Head Starts and kindergarten, because nobody talked to the little children anymore. So it was like, sit down, shut up, watch the TV. And Miss Rogers, I love Miss Rogers. Don't get me wrong, people, and don't get me started on Big Bird, okay?
Big Bird? Give it a Big Bird.
That is not the same as a Nana, and for this man, Donald Davis, talked about his grandma, his aunties, his uncles, and that they lived in a simpler time, in a simpler way. My nephew, that's really what that story was all about, is being with Papa every day. And trust me, Papa was no miracle worker. He was just a man. He was just a poor country man. But he loved that little boy, and that little boy loved him. And if you put him on a scale of 1 to 10 to compare him to even community members at the time, different, you know, sounds a little, feels a little, and if you're willing to cross that line and say, would you share with yourself, you look so beautiful tonight, I would like to know you better. And then, you know, this is what it takes for us. But in our world, it's very easy to shut everybody in, you get out your iPad, which I do not have, and or your Kindle, or your whatever, I do not have those things. And then, you know, whatever, and we forget each other.
Well, one of the things that happened in your Papa story that would probably be very difficult to occur today because of the internet, because of texting and telephones and iPads, is that your nephew probably at that time didn't have access to that. And so, Papa, they were able to build that relationship. And so I would offer to all of you who are under 30 to sometimes put it down and get to know your Papa and your uncles and your grannies and get to know them, because they are the storytellers and they will tell you who you are and your history. So please put it down sometimes to listen to them. That's going to be so important to you. Just because your teacher is right on you, got to let it.
I would like to ditto what you had said, and also Fatima, about communication. Even if we do put down the iPads and the tweets and the iPhones and all of that, there's a level of responsibility that's needed. When you shared that piece about the originator of the One World, or is it One World? First World. His intent was pure. But what happened was, the way I interpret your story, is that over time, people began to abuse that word and didn't take responsibility for the abuse of it. So I think that in communicating on all levels and on all forums, there has to be a level of responsibility and accountability. Because, as you said, this is how we're connecting.
And I would like to respond to all of that. I'm going to take a slightly different tack. I think there's a time when we need to put down the technology and share with each other face to face. But on the other hand, I have discovered many stories online and on the internet, one that I would like to share with you later, Nadine, that I would not have found and would not have been inspired by this young woman's story that I found. And I think you will relate to it. And so the only way I can share it with you is by giving you her name, and you can look it up on the internet. It's another tool. But just like you said, to not abuse the tool or make it something that doesn't have any meaning. There are times when we do have to listen and talk face to face. And then there are times when we can use the technology that we have to connect in other ways.
Absolutely. Across the world. Absolutely.
I just wanted to say, along with what you just said, my grandfather's sister lived to be 95. She shared stories with me about my grandfather, who I was very close to, about when he was young, and what he did and didn't do, and how he did it. And I could take that material and dialogue it and keep it, because we have the technology that we have. So you have two that you can really appreciate. The older person who would never get on the computer at 95 and, you know, start her manuscript or whatever. But I can take what she has, I can take it orally and then turn it into something else. But there's no richness like hearing, because I could see my grandfather doing some of the stuff that he did, and my mother didn't even know these stories. So I felt really privileged.
What a gift and a treasure to preserve that.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, it's interesting to see everybody's perspective, and I'm really thankful, and that I think, yes, they do go hand in hand. I only had the opportunity to come here tonight because Jasmine sent me an invite on Facebook. and then I got it on my phone while I was at an open mic. And I was like, I'm going to go there.
I didn't tell you to get rid of the stuff. I just put it down for the moment.
I'm just saying, like,
You know, that's really interesting because, you know, I'm a project manager, and at the end of every project you do a lesson learned, and it's always about we could have communicated more, we can communicate better, you know, that type of thing. And so I think you're absolutely dead on. It's like we as human beings need every single tool we can to communicate,
Yes.
right? To get it down and get it right. Some things work better for some things, and you know, you wouldn't have gotten this if it was oral tradition only. You would have heard about it 3 weeks from now or something, you know? So, thank you, because you're right. It's easy to say, oh, technology, oh, this, but all together they provide us with.
It has to be a balance though.
It
It really has to be a balance. Because I'm gonna tell you, most people, if we take a survey, most people do not remember phone numbers as we did 10 years ago. So, you know, we have to remember that we can't negate one skill that we learned for another. This technology is beautiful. I, like yourself, I came here because my cousin, Cheryl, she texted me, that's how I got here. I can appreciate all that. But ask me my daughter's phone number. I'm not gonna lie to you, I would have to pull out my cell phone and look it up. So that's what I'm saying, that's my 2 cents to it. That's
Felicia, and then, right.
I think I agree with everything everyone's saying, but I think that from my personal experience with my 2 teen kids in technologies, I think where it becomes a problem is when it breaks down your ability to have good communication. Because you're so used to just texting, you're so used to just sending an email, that when it's time for us to sit down and actually engage in a dialogue, you have to really coach them how to do that, because they're so used to using the technology. No, seriously.
It's really building and working all your habits and not
And keep
talking one
coaching.
or the other.
Is that,
You don't have to coach them to use their lips to go, I'm looking at you.
Is that, don't say that. So when it gets in the way of being able to actually effectively engage in a dialogue, then it does become a problem. Not so much around how much you do it, because, you know, it's convenience, it's easy, it gets us places, it makes us aware of things, but when we don't know how to put it down and actually engage in a dialogue, then it really is a problem.
I think the one thing I find different between oral communication and electronic communication, and the one thing that I think is missing in electronic communication is the attitude or the emotion behind what is being said. Because when you get a text, you can read a text that says, I have to go to the store again today, but the intent could be, oh, I have to go to the store again today. You know, you don't know, so it's just kind of like that hashtag that you talked about.
Yeah.
We didn't hear the intent behind his voice and how he wanted to say it, and so that's how it gets twisted around. I've had my mom she can't seem to do, you know, capital letters and small letters when she types. So every time she sends something, it always looks like she's yelling at me. So it's just like you just don't know what the emotion and what the intent is behind something that's sent to you electronically or through the computer. And I think that's the one big thing that's actually missing is attitude and emotion.
I don't know, the people I deal with, I can read their emotions. I'm from a very heavy technical usage environment, but I can tell when John is yelling and when John has a concern, because to me, people form the way they speak. If you get to know them first as a human, you never meet them, you never engage in them on the human side, you're right, you can't decipher that. But many a person, I can tell if someone's texting with an edge, you know, because people are you're the same person. And smarty mouths are smarty mouths.
Well, what you can't tell though is what's driving what you see.
Oh, I can't see mine.
And by the same token, when people are looking at us, they can't always tell, and it's very easy for us to read other people's. What I'd be interested in hearing, we talked a little bit about technology, but there are lots of ways that people tell stories that aren't necessarily about talking. And they're, you know, our tagline for Project Humanities is talking, listening, connecting. And if we just limit the talking to what you can say or what you can write, then it feels like a whole world is sort of left out, because people do all kinds of things to talk and tell stories. We can tell a story without saying a word. So, you know, is that as effective? And that's one other way that we connect with other parts of the world. Sometimes if you see a photograph or a painting, or you hear, you know, a piece of music, that's not so much about one-on-one talking, but rather listening to someone say something, do something, needlepoint something, crochet something.
I think
that storytelling.
I don't think
I think you need it all. I think we're in a society where we depend on gadgets to do things that we don't have the skill to do yet, to begin with. That's the danger of a 6-year-old with an iPad texting people, you know, maybe they're brilliant, maybe they're the next Amadeus or not. But when you don't have the skill, then you become more dependent on a tool that, to your point, doesn't convey your intent, your inflections and all of those things. So it's an interesting thing. I know I've toned down on the technology I use consciously, and I've got friends that out of state going, where are you? I said, I don't hit email every day, I don't hit it every week, doesn't count. So don't do anything urgent and email.
I guess what I was saying though is that I know those situations where what we read, we create a narrative about how somebody is responding to us.
Oh, yeah.
What we don't know is what's motivating that. And I know I'm certainly guilty of misreading something because I don't have all the information. So the extent to which we are willing to take a risk and imagine that just because somebody walked past us and didn't say anything, doesn't mean that that's really about us. You know, we don't know people's narratives and they don't know ours. And how much do we give people the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that? That's my question.
Well, and I think sort of building off of that, the reason you need all three that you're talking about is you need the full story. Think about how many times you've read something online and it's coming from a biased perspective, and then let's say you go experience it. I'll use that like my own experience. Coming from Africa, there is a perception that all of Africa is this civil war, famine, you know, wild. I mean, I used to have kids when we came here, I was 12 years old, asked me, did you ride elephants to school? No, I took the car like you did. I don't know. Maybe the other part, you know, why? You know, but it's a perspective, and I think it's so important that we get, but that you get out of your narrow mindset of this is the story. The story is what I read on the internet about Africa, and this is Africa. When you go experience it, you have a whole different, you know, so.
Open to education, open to learning, and learning how to listen instead of assuming you rode the elephants.
Right. But also, there are stories that are written online for a biased perspective. It is actually to build a negative imagery. And I'm not saying that that's always the case, but you have to, I always tell people, you have to be careful about the stories you do also read and use that as your basis for an understanding of everything. That's one component of it. But go and talk, go and connect, go and listen.
Like Little Black Samba.
Right, well, okay, you know.
The narrative of every little black child.
Exactly, right. And it's not a monolithic experience of every person, every culture, every country, every, you know.
person, every poor person.
Old person, young person.
You know, you need all of that. Because if you focus on just, I'm going to get all my sources from the internet and read the internet and this is my source, you're only going to have one very narrow perspective of that story,
you know,
my opinion.
My technical, and you're right in everything you say. The internet was invented to make us smarter. That when you don't use it well, it's not the internet's fault. Because the very things you say about verifying a story, you need to do that if you walk into a library, if you go into a lecture, if you attend a church, a synagogue, or a temple. You listen, get a perspective, and then you decide the sources. Now, if you let every ad that pops up in your face tell you what is and is not about Africa, well, you're a really fun person anyway.
Well, but there's some people whose perspective, they get all their news from the internet, and they believe everything they see and read, and that is the definitive source of what they believe.
And then you always have that, you know.
I know, but it's a balance, I guess. It's just what you're saying.
It's a balance, and
you got to look at all sources.
And who you're talking to, who your audience is.
About what Dr. Lester said and what you've been talking about, I have a story. Anybody remember or have seen Dr. Leo Buscaglia? Who, many years ago, he was the love doctor. He taught a class at USC about love. He was a great man, but he tells this story. It's about 60 seconds, if that. There's a woman driving up a very narrow mountain road, and it was very precarious. Not much room, only for one car at a time. And she's going very slow and going very slow, and all of a sudden, around the corner comes a man in a car going so fast, and he comes by her, and she almost hits him, and he leans out the window and he yells, "Pig!" And she's so frustrated, and he goes by and she goes, "Hog!" And she goes around the corner and hits a pig.
left. And yeah, it went by very quickly, yeah. Right? It was very wonderful. If you're leaving, thank you so much for
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Early appointments.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, for sharing
It's
it.
been a pleasure.
And no cell phone to remind us. We don't own one.
Right.
Yes.
No, thank you. Please check out our other things online.
Is there anything else that you want to share, put into the circle? I mean, this has been so rich and so wonderful. And I am so happy that we had the variety that we have. We had the young folks. We have the young woman who wants to learn to drive. You will, believe me. You'll be tired of cars one day. You'll see it, like, what's going to drive you one day, believe me, but this is not the day, so enjoy. You know, Baloo, I'm so glad of the diversity we had here, because we were able to hear vital voices. We were able to hear your own stories. And this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to hear what you had to say. Because everything you have to say is important, is very vital. So I thank you for sharing your stories, for being so wealthy. Here's richness right here, right here. Now I've gotten so much from it. Is there anything else that any of you want to say? Amen. Amen.
How about a round of applause for
I want to give you the option, if you'd like to share a story formally. This is not pressure, this is because you're a storyteller.
Oh, well, right, yeah. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I did. I'm a retired school teacher, and before I retired, one day I was sitting in my classroom, and I was so tired, so extremely tired. And I know that no poetry has been done here and just been talking, but I wrote a poem that in fact does tell a story of a teacher who is exhausted. Exhausted with paying children to come to school, exhausted with more and more and more papers to fill up, and more and more in-services to go to, and just not being appreciated by a lot of people, and sometimes students. So I wrote a poem called Singing the Blues, and it's written in Ebonics. So for those of you who don't understand Ebonics, I'm sorry, but that's what I wrote the poem in. So the poem goes, Lord have mercy, ain't it Friday yet? How long, Lord, is this week gonna get? Last night lasted 2 days, now this afternoon, this morning's still going strong. I ain't never heard of a week lasting this long. No, Lord, I ain't trying to run things for you. I'm just down here on the ground singing the blues. But it sure would be nice if Friday would hurry up and come. Then a person would know the week's almost done. The way things is going and the week lasting so long, I might as well sit down and write a song. Sweet Saturday morning, come on real soon. 'Cause even if I don't, I could sleep till noon. I say sweet Saturday morning, hey, won't you come on soon? 'Cause I say even if I don't, I could sleep till noon. Lord have mercy, ain't it Friday yet?
I'm going to let that be.
Thank you, thank you.
And just right hand over left, always right hand over left, one for everyone for receiving. Let's let's close this circle.
Right.
Did you get in the circle? Thank you. If that's, it's okay for you to, okay. Mind my business. Okay, if we could just in our hearts and in our souls, if we could just go inside for a moment. We're getting ready to go out into a world with so many stories. We're taking our own stories out into the world, and we're going to be faced with a lot of stories. Some will be told, some will be perceived. Some you won't ever get to hear. But know that inside of you is the master storyteller, and inside of you is the master story listener. You are a vital voice, and it's so important that you speak the truth of what you have learned, not only today, but through your travels and in life. I thank you so much for being a part of my story, and I can only pray that the stories you tell will be the stories that change our world. Thank you.
Integrity, we're talking about honesty, we're talking about forgiveness. And it doesn't matter what your political alignment is, or what your sexual orientation is, or what your weight is, or what your skin color is, or what your height is. These are the kinds of ways that we like to move forward in a way that makes us all better. So thank you very much for being here. I have to acknowledge that Vital Voices is a collaboration between ASU's Performance in the Borderlands and also Savvy Pen Consultants. And it's an effort to get ASU in the communities, but also to recognize that you are the vital voice, not just experts from ASU, but you. And we've got two awesome events that's part of this evening, and one is a story slam that I've never seen before, and the other is an opportunity for us to share our stories as we are so moved. So I thank you for coming. There's food over here. Please feel free, as the spirit moves you, as your stomach moves you, to get up and eat. We don't want to take food back, but we want you to feel like you come here so there'll be something that will keep your stomach from growling. So first on board is storyteller Mark. Thank you, storyteller.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Goldman. There are some flyers on your chairs there for the Great Arizona Story Slam. I am a storyteller, and I'm also the producer of the Great Arizona Story Slam. Now, some of you may have heard of, how many have heard of poetry slams? Story slam is very similar, except that instead of telling your poem or reciting poetry, we tell stories. It's a competition. And we have 3 storytellers here tonight who are going to compete for first prize, bragging rights of their story. Most story slams are events where people tell personal stories. Now, there are all kinds of stories that we tell in life. Many of you traditional storytellers tell folk tales, fairy tales, historical tales, sometimes in school or education. Many different kinds of tales. Personal stories, personal tales and stories are the ones that we focus on in the Story Slam. Now, the slams grew out of pretty much one event many years ago. A man named George Dawes Green moved from Atlanta to New York. And when he lived in Atlanta, he used to sit on his grandmother's porch, screened-in porch, but there were little holes in the screens where the moths would come in. And they would all tell stories, personal stories about their families, and sit on that porch. Now, when George Dawes Green moved to New York, he missed that. And he decided he would try and recreate it. And he started in his living room, where he invited friends over, just a few circle of friends like we have here, to tell different stories. And he called it The Moth, because the moths would come in and flicker at the light. Well, it grew in huge proportions, and now there are moth chapters all over the country. New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Dallas. It's a huge phenomenon where people stand outside and wait all the way around the block in lines to get into those venues. There are other places, some in San Francisco, our first language, before we actually had languages that we could write down. People would tell each other stories about what happened during the day when they went out to hunt, when they came back. I'm going to tell you just a short little story. Our theme for tonight, and we always have a theme for story slang. Our theme for tonight is, I tried to make it something that would fit in, and it's Story Matters. Story matters in lots of different ways. I have 3 nephews and 1 niece, and many years ago they came to visit. Now they're grown up, they're 40, 42. But when they were about 12, 13, 14, they came to visit us, and we had the entire family together. And at dinner time one night we said, well, what do you want to talk about? And all the kids said, tell us more Mama stories. Tell us more Nana stories. Tell us more Uncle Mark stories. That was me, Uncle Mark. Because they wanted to hear the real stories about what their mother, my sister, did when she was their age. And they always want to hear that. Family history is very, very important. So I'll tell you a short little story, and then we'll bring up our first official teller. And what I'm going to have you all do is vote. At the end of our slam, they're going to tell 7, 8-minute stories. And at the end of our slam, we'll bring them each up, and you'll vote for the one that you thought was the best by a round of applause, okay? I'm not in the running because I'm the producer. So. I don't get the prize. I could take a quarter out of one pocket and put it in another. I'm going to tell you a short story about my 2 nephews, Kevin and Corey. And when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was a performer. I was in the theater, and I was in a company called Disney on Parade. Anybody ever hear that or remember that? It was the Disney shows, and they brought them all around. But it was not like the Ice Follies, because we weren't on skates. We were actually in regular shoes, and we danced on a wooden stage that was the size of that ice rink in an arena. Now, I was with the Winnie the Pooh company, and we did Winnie the Pooh on stage for half an hour. We did several other stories. And I was Winnie the Pooh. And I was in this big, huge costume. Big belly like this, and a big head that came from here and went way up. And if Winnie the Pooh had to cover his eyes, I had to go like that and shake my whole body and say, oh, no, I don't want to see that. Now, my nephews, who were 4 and 5, came to see the show. Now, you know Disney's pretty strict about not being seen half in, half out of costumes, and they want the magic to stay there. So when they came to the show, I came out in the front and I said, now you're going to see Winnie the Pooh, but Uncle Mark will be inside Winnie the Pooh. I thought they could understand that. So they came, they watched the show, they loved it. They went back home. Now, a couple of weeks later, my mother, their Nana, came to visit. So she got there. Now, she didn't know that they had come to see the show with me in there. So they went to visit. She said, well, I'm here. Do you want to hear a story? Oh, Nana, tell us a story. Read us a book. What book do you want to read? Oh, read Winnie the Pooh. So she sat down with Kevin on one side and Corey on the other and the Winnie the Pooh book. And you know how all good Nanas do. Now, who's that? Oh, that's Tigger. Oh, who's that? Oh, that's Eeyore. And then she pointed to Winnie the Pooh. She said, and who's that? And Kevin said, oh, that's Uncle Mark. Now, Nana said, no, Kevin, that's not Uncle Mark. That's Winnie the Pooh. Oh, no, Nana, he said, that's Uncle Mark. She got a little perturbed, as Nanas have a bent to do. Now, Kevin, that is not Uncle Mark. That's Winnie the Pooh. And he got a real sad look on his face. He thought real hard. And then he got a smile on his face. And he looked up at his Nana and he said, you're right, Nana. That's Winnie the Pooh. But Uncle Mark's inside. Thank you. So, we have 3 tellers tonight, as I said, and our first teller, please welcome Sean Buvala.
You're not leaving, Professor, until you and I talk tonight. That's what we're talking about. That's stuff to talk about.
Is there a story in there?
We're going to create one.
Oh, okay.
In some cultures, storytelling is sacred for different times of the year. And for me, This story that I tell, I almost always tell only in the dead of summer, which you'll understand as you hear the story. But recently, as I watch the news and what have you, I figure that if you can go and clean dishes that are already clean for a purpose, then I can tell this story whenever figure I want. I've been throttling back all day. Beggars can't be choosers. Now understand, I didn't say that. The guest said that. Beggars can't be choosers. That's what he said. See, I was working at a church up in northeast Scottsdale, whichever direction that actually is from where we're standing. Let's say that way for right now. I was working at a church up in northeast Scottsdale. I was working in youth ministry at the time, and I've worked in parishes all over this state. I've worked in some of the poorest areas. I've worked in some of the richest areas, and that doesn't always mean money, by the way. And so I'm working up in northeast Scottsdale, and we were going to go downtown to one of the many, many feeding places that are there in downtown Phoenix, right in the middle of July. Now, it's really easy to get volunteers at organizations like this during the holidays. Everybody's knocking themselves over to get in line to go feed the poor in November and December. But in the middle of July, there's nobody there because it's boiling hot and you'll trash off the whole time that you're there. It's awful. So nobody's lining up. And the corporate groups, they do come down too. So during the school year, they care about the community, but during the summer, they don't, okay? Because you can't line everybody up in the same t-shirts and have them go serve food to the poor. So here I am, coming from northeast Scottsdale, which is one of the better off areas of northeast Scottsdale. Having money is not a sin. Having money is not a problem. It's what it does to you. That's the problem. So I'm working in northeast Scottsdale. There's nothing wrong with people living in northeast Scottsdale. So I've got 9 kids in the back of the church van, and we're driving down to the center of downtown Phoenix. Beggars can't be choosers. I didn't say it. Yes, did. And so we're driving down to the middle of downtown Phoenix, and as we get closer to that area that is downtown Phoenix, one of the boys in the back of the bus, or the van, says out loud, he says, "I've never seen anything like this." And I said, "What are you talking about?" I thought I was trying to be a smart ass. He said, "I've never seen anything like this." And I said, "What?" He says, "I've never seen poor people." I really did thought he was pulling my chain, but it turns out he's not. He says, "I've seen this on television, but I've never seen poor people." He had never seen anything quite like the experience that he's getting. Is that his fault? No. Was he a bad person? No. But that's his experience. So as we get to this place, we get set up, and it's boiling hot. It's so hot that the line for the poor people that are coming to get fed isn't 675, it was 325, because it was too hot even for people to eat. Beggars can't be choosers. So we get in there, we prep our stuff, and we do all the things that we're supposed to do to get ready to serve, and they open the doors at 4:30 or 4:45, whatever it happens to be. And the line of the 47%, those 2% of the 47%, those people that choose to be poor, remember them? They come in the door with their plates with numbers on it because they're not allowed to get seconds because they must feel entitled to that or something. So they're not allowed to get seconds. So they come in with their plate, and then we start serving the stuff. Now I'm first in line, and I'm with a big pot of spaghetti type product, which is noodles and sauce and whatever vegetables they have. And over here somewhere, there's a young lady standing next to me, and she's serving salad. And over here somewhere, there's a young woman serving bread, which is not day old, it's days old bread. And then kind of towards over there, there's a girl serving desserts, which is donated pastries left over from places like Fry's and Abco and Abco. I don't know where that came from. Albertsons, that's how old I am, Abco. Albertsons, what have you, and those are cut in half. And so they start coming through the line, and we're slopping it up, and they're getting their pizza, we're slopping it up. I get one guy who comes in, and I put it on his plate, and he says, "Oh, can I have a second one?" And I said, "No, you know the rules, I can only give you one." He goes, "Oh, yeah, all right." So he goes down, and he gets it, he gets to the very last girl. And she reaches into that pastry box, beggars can't be choosers. She reaches into that pastry box and she slaps a half a blueberry muffin gently on his plate. And he stops and he looks at her and he says, "Do you have any chocolate? Because I really don't care for blueberries." And she starts to dig into this container of multi-day-old pastries, which shocked both of them. Both her because somebody spoke to her in the line, and him because somebody listened to what he said. You know, beggars can't be choosers.
And so she started digging around in there, and now he's embarrassed that she's listening. And so he says, oh, never mind. I'll take the blueberry, because beggars can't be choosers. And he walks away. Now, in my story tonight, I've been telling stories for almost 3 decades. In my story tonight, there isn't a big aha moment where you go, oh, that's the point of the story? Because I don't know what the point of the story is for you. Beggars can't be choosers. But you know what? If you're looking for that opportunity to think about what you got in your life and what you have, what all of us have, it's been probably a long time since any of us, for most of us in this room, as I look about all of us, when anyone else has chosen for you blueberry or chocolate, when anyone else has chosen for you hot or cold, when anyone else has chosen for you yes or no, when anyone chosen is what percent you belong to, when anyone's cleaned your dishes that have already been cleaned, it's been a long time since anyone's done that for you. It's been a long time. But you know what? In the middle of July, when I tell this sacred story, when I'm in the middle of July, it's hot. And there is nobody at the food place serving. It's the same staff over and over again trying to feed 600 people a day coming through their line. And so if you get a chance to stop and want to know where your life is, in the middle of July, I invite you to go down to one of these places and serve and discover a whole new section of your life, a whole new section. Nobody can force you. Nobody can make you. Nobody can tell you what to do. No one can force you to go down there. You know why? Because beggars can't be choosers. Thanks.
As you may well be able to tell from Sean's story, the best stories are the ones that we can connect with, the ones that we can relate to, that human condition that is universal to all of us. We each have different details about our story, but in the end, stories are about the human condition. So next up, please welcome Brian Lee.
Can I ask you all a personal question? Has anybody here ever smoked a marijuana cigarette? Now, you don't really have to answer that, because I can tell by looking around the room that some of you have.
Kelsey.
I don't really know much about marijuana cigarettes. The only one thing I do know is that they make you really incredibly hungry. That is why I am 100% convinced that while my mother was pregnant with me, she must have been a pothead. Because it seems from the moment I was born, I weighed 300 pounds. I am sure I was the biggest baby ever recorded in the history of the world. And I often wonder what my mother must have looked like while she was pregnant with me. I figure she looked something like a fly who had swallowed an elephant. And for as long as I can remember, I had been overweight. And I have gone on every diet and tried every exercise plan known to man in order to lose weight. I have been on Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig, and I've been on the weenie diet, the Jesus diet, the Atkins diet. I've had urine injections. You name it, I've done it. And as a last resort for me to lose weight, my mother had a great idea. She decided to buy me a ticket on the Cruise to Lose with Richard Simmons. The only thing I really want to say is I would really like to meet the man who thought it would be a great idea to take 400, 300 plus pound people, put them all on a boat, and then ship them off to sea. This was a very frightening experience for me, especially when the dinner bell would ring and we would all run to one side of the boat. I found myself in the bathroom holding onto the toilet trying to pull the boat the other direction. Anybody here ever been on a cruise? How big are the bathrooms on a cruise? Yeah, the bathrooms are really tiny. And even smaller are those showers. So imagine being 315 to 400 pounds and trying to squeeze yourself back into the showers. It didn't happen. We couldn't take showers while we were on the boat. And I had this horrible fear that every morning the captain was going to call us up to the deck. He was going to lay us all down on the floor, and then he was just going to hose us off. And it was really disconcerting when we tried to sightsee, and we would walk over to the railing of the boat, and we would look out into the water, and we noticed that all of the whales were watching us. Every morning at 6 a.m. on the boat, Richard Simmons got on the loudspeaker, "It's time for yoga!" So we'd all have to go into the big ballroom to do yoga. Now, of course, I was wearing an outfit maybe similar to this, very, very tight. And the first thing Richard Simmons says to me is, he says, "You know, when you do yoga, you're supposed to wear loose-fitting clothing." And I said, if I had loose-fitting clothing, I wouldn't need to do yoga. And then he proceeded to try to put us into these really weird body positions. One of them is where you have both of your feet on the floor, you put one hand down on the floor, you put the other hand down on the floor. They call this the downward dog. Well, on me, it was more like full moon rising. And I thought once we got off the boat, that would be the end of it. So I'm in bed Monday morning after the cruise. 6 o'clock, the phone rings. It's Richard Simmons. "I was just calling to find out if you were going to the gym this morning to do your cardio." Anybody here ever been to a gym? Tell me if I'm not right. The only people at the gym working out are people who don't even need to be there, right? Yes. Nobody looked like me. You know, I walked in, all the guys had washboard stomachs, and here I was with my washing machine stomach. And nobody dressed like I did at the gym. Now the men wear all those really like tight spandex shirts, and they have these huge bulging muscles. And here I was with my headband, leg warmers, let's get physical t-shirt. Now when I go to the gym to work out, I don't like anybody to notice me and watch me. So I always go to the treadmills in the very back row so no one can see me. So on this particular day, it was no different. I walked into the gym, I get onto the treadmill, and I'm walking on the treadmill. And I never noticed when I got on the treadmill that there was this really big woman on the treadmill beside me. Now, I don't like to be rude, but I was trying to walk on that treadmill and eat my slice of pizza at the same time. And out of the corner of my eye, all I kept seeing was this jiggle, 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 jiggle. Jiggle, 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 jiggle. And like I mentioned before, I don't like to be rude, so I just turned off the treadmill, and I turned and I stared at her. And when I did that, I realized it wasn't a woman at all. It was a mirror. Now, why do they put a mirror in the gym? I mean, if they're going to do something that crazy, they should at least put a sign on the mirror that says, "Caution, objects may appear fatter." Or at least offer you some kind of counseling once you leave. I used to get really, really angry because I couldn't lose weight. And I'm still kind of angry that I can't lose weight. But the way I look at it now is that because I can't lose weight, and because I have all these adventures trying to lose weight, I now have stories to tell. So the next time you see me, you may want to ask me about my adventures in liposuction or getting my jaw wired shut, because those are the only two things I have not tried yet. But whatever it is, you can rest assured that no matter what I try to lose weight, I will have another story to tell.
Everybody can breathe easy. I'm not going to ask how many people relate to that story. I will also tell you that in most of slams, we generally have a time limit. We set a time limit, 6, 7, 8 minutes, and we keep strict to that. And if you go over it, you're disqualified. You can't win the prize. But tonight, I decided we're not doing a strict time limit. So right now, we'll bring up our last teller, a lady who's been telling in the Valley for a long, long time. I think you'll enjoy her. Sandy Oglesby.
Oh yeah, so I just want to say, so I was at one of his slams, I had this really great story. I went over by 10 seconds. Disqualified. I said, I'm finishing my story. I finished my story. I grew up here in Phoenix. My whole life's been here. And I married a man from Alabama. Shocking. I never knew and never learned so many things until I went back there. Well, at first they were not too pleased to see me. They had a name for me. The damn Yankee. That's all one word. Don't think I'm saying a bad word, it's all one word. But then they kind of got over themselves, and by time everybody grew older, things were much better there, and I got a little respect. I went back for one of the family reunions. I happened to sit next to my nephew, who was now a grown man, on the little front porch swing, and we started talking. And I said, how have you been, Keith? And he said, well, I've been right good. Thank you very much, Aunt Sandy. And I said, so what have you been doing? And he said, I've been lonely for Papa. Now, he was talking about my father-in-law and his grandfather. And I said, you know, I bet you do miss him, Keith. I bet you really do miss him. He said, nothing in my life has been more significant than my Papa. He said, I miss him so much I can't tell you. Aunt Sandy, if there was an hour that I could have with any human being that's ever lived, I mean from Presidents Lincoln going back to even Jesus himself, I'd pick Papa. I said, you must have really, he said, I'm about to tell you something I ain't never told nobody before. Just inspired me to have to tell you this. He said, did I ever tell you that when I was about 8 years old, Papa taught me to drive? I said, no, I'd like to hear that story. So he says, well, I have to set the background for you. He said, you remember we lived over that other house, that big house up on the stilts, and there were those two big trees, and Papa decided to cut one of their trees down a little bit. It was hanging out over the house, and that was the year that he done broke his leg. Fell out of the tree and broke his leg. I said, I wondered how that happened. It didn't happen because he wasn't a good cutter. It happened because he had cataracts, and when he fell, because he couldn't see when he was cutting. I said, oh, okay, got it. So then he says, and that's the year Papa taught me to drive. I said, well. He said, this is how it done happened. All Papa could do was whittle, and he couldn't hardly make nothing, just sitting there on the porch whittling because he couldn't see because of the cataracts. And we couldn't go any place. I went to his house every weekend, and then the summer, oh, the summers were glorious every day with Papa, but we couldn't go nowhere. He was kind of sad about it. I was sad because I like to go every place with him. He said, and then all of a sudden he looked up and he said, boy, I want you to go over there to my truck. I want you to climb up in the front seat and see if you can see anything over that steering wheel. I said, yes, sir. I went running up. You remember the truck, Aunt Sandy? It was that 64 Chevy, that white fleet-side truck. I opened the door, I climbed inside, I sat down, I grabbed hold of the steering wheel. I said, no, sir, can't see nothing. He said, lean up a little further. I leaned up in between the wheel. I said, I can see the front end now. He said, I can fix that. Get down, let's go to the shed. Now the shed, if you're not from the South, you might not know the value of a shed. It's the storage house, the treasure chest of things that are afraid to be given up. Somebody's house might burn down, they might need this, and his mother would pull up this rusted basket to put your dishes in. I mean, it was so bad, if you put the dish down too far, it'd fall apart. But they kept things in there. And he said, then Papa looked around, rummaged around, and he came up with an old Coca-Cola crate. That's when they used to be wood. He said, take this out, put it in the truck, sit on it, see what you can do. He ambled back, and he said, I jumped up, and I got in there, and I said, woohoo! Yes, sir, Papa. I can see the front end. I can see the dog. Papa said, that's good. Well, Papa, there's still a problem. I can't touch the pedals. I can fix that, boy. Let's go back to the shed. Go back to the shed. He's back to the shed, and he starts finding pieces of wood, and he starts stacking them up. And then he brings them up to the front of the truck. He says, get in. I got in. He said, sit comfortable. Oh, just a minute. He ran over to the porch as fast as he could. He got a cushion, he put it on my back. I could sit up real good. He said, can you touch it? I reached down and I could touch the pedal. I said, yes, yes, sir, Papa, I can touch it. He said, that's good. You got trucks go shed. We got a lot of them. He wired them together. He came back and he wired them to the pedals, the brake, the clutch, the gas pedal. He said, get in. I said, yes, sir. I got in. He said, can you touch them all? I said, yes, sir. He said, all right, son, I'm going to teach you to drive. Took a while, but by the third day, he said, I was driving up and down that little dirt road next to Papa's house. I was getting good. He said, tomorrow, he's going someplace. And for weeks on end, we traveled over all of Talladega and Calhoun County. We went everywhere. Well, everywhere. Papa wanted to go, and I was glad to drive him. Now, I said, Papa, I don't think I can do the clutch and the shifting at the same. He said, son, that doesn't take any sight. That takes feel. When I tell you to, you hit that clutch, I'll shift for you. So we were on our way. Now, Papa, I don't know if you really knew Papa like I did, Aunt Sandy, but he was Scottish. A Scotsman, don't know. Yes, I knew that. Black Scot, but that doesn't mean he was black. That means he had dark hair. Rather than like the Scotch-Irish who were all blonde and blue. And then he said, Scots, you know, they were the black-headed people with olive skin, and a Scotsman likes to make Scotch. Nice and dark Scotch. So I think that's where, those are not the light ones that come from the uplands. Those are the downlands ones that got sent over here as indentured servants. He said, so there he was. And we'd go into the backwoods. We'd go in the backwoods. He'd say, these are some relatives of yours. That's how I declared. They looked like rednecks to me. But there they were. And we'd sit there and Papa, they'd go get some moonshine. And everybody'd have a little, but I didn't have any. I was only 8. So I was the driver, the designated driver. And he said, everything was dandy. We'd done this for weeks and weeks. Everything was working out fine, going up and down the road. And all of a sudden we was coming home one day. Oh, Lord, Sandy, it was terrible. A police car pulled in behind us and turned on the lights. I started to cry. I was going to pee my pants. I got so upset. He said, what are we going to do, Papa? He said, pull over, son. It's okay. I said, no, you don't understand, Papa. If my mom finds out about this, she's going to kill you. Then she's going to kill me. Let's just go to jail. He said, no, nothing's going to happen. You just relax. You just relax. He said, Papa was all relaxed. He just rolled down the window. Put his arm on the windowsill. Waited. Officer Bobby Gaines came up to the side window. How you doing, Mr. Cook? Cook said, fine, just fine. How are you, Bobby? Didn't call him Officer Gaines. He'd known him since he was a little boy. He said, sir, is that there Ronnie Barber's kid? He said, heck no, that's my boy. He said, well, Mr. Cook, I just want to say, you can't let a little boy drive your truck. You're going to have to drive. He said, ain't you heard none news lately? I got myself a bum leg. I can't see where to flip. I got these here cataracts. He drives. He's got perfectly good legs. He's got good sight. And I'm his helper. It's good. He said, sir, how old is he? Old enough to drive. Obviously, he's driving it. He said, well, sir, I'm just saying that you're going to have to drive or you're going to have to get out of that truck. He said, let me tell you something, Officer Gaines. I've known you since you was knee-high to a cricket. I've known this road before it was a road. We was logging up and down here before there even was anything but a dirt road. And if I want to drive on this road with my grandson, I'm going to drive on this road. And he looked at his watch as if he could see. And he said, well, look at that. It's just about lunchtime. Got to get this boy home for sauce meat sandwich, RC cola, and moon pie. If you don't mind, we're going home. If that's a problem for you, why don't you just follow us on home? He said, drive, boy. And I did. Started out driving, and there was Officer Gaines standing in the middle of the road, just staring off in amazement. And finally he ran back, and he got in his car, and he he followed us, didn't turn on the lights or nothing. Now, it's about 8 miles to Papa's house in the backwoods there. Pulled up right in the yard like we always do. Papa got out best he could, started ambling toward the house. Got up them steps and said, "Well, Officer Gaines, see you come for lunch. Come on in." I said, "You want to come? You want RC Cola?" "Oh yeah, sir. Thank you, sir. How about one of them South?" He said, "I'm not quite sure what South Smith is these days, but I don't think I'll take that." "Well, you want a moon pie, don't you?" "Yes, sir." And he ate that and he talked to us and he said, "Well, Mr. Cook, I'm just glad that I got to see you home safely, and please don't take this here boy out like that no more." He said, "You just don't worry about me, son. Everything's fine." Now Keith said, "Aunt Sandy, you'd think Dad put a big hindrance on our driving around Calhoun and Talladega County, but he didn't. Every day after that, Papa would just say, 'Get in the truck and he's going for a ride.' And we got in the truck and we went for a ride. Every once in a while, we'd see Mr. Gates. You know how those officers are, always sneaking out on the side of the road, waiting for you to whiz by. We was never whizzing. We were just going by nice and slow. And Officer Gaines would look at us and smile and wave. As we went by, Aunt Sandy, I'm telling you, there was no greater man in the world than my Papa.
So,
Now, if you want to hear my side of this story, I'll talk to you later.
now, I do want to say, I'd venture a guess, except for those young ladies back there at the table, has everybody in here been in that place where you see that light coming in the back of your rear view mirror? Well, thank you very much. So now's the time when we vote. Oh, wait, you're gonna take your hand. Oh, well, first of all, let's give a big round of applause for all of them. And now's the time when we find out who the winner of the Story Slam is.
She went 10 seconds over.
So, by your applause, please, I'll remind you that Sean Buvala told his story about beggars can't be choosers. Brian Lee told his story about his Richard Simmons cruise. And Sandy Oldby told about her nephew learning how to drive. So let's hear it for Sean Buvala. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Neil. And I'm going to turn it back to you now, I guess. And just one more thing. Michelle, you have those flyers here? Anybody didn't get a flyer? Want a little flyer for the Story Slam? Now, I will tell you that today was just a demonstration, so we could show you what a Story Slam is like. Here you go. I'll give you some back there. You can pass them out. In the real Story Slam, anybody can put their name in the hat. Anybody can come up and tell a story. The way we work it is, we usually, when we start the slam, if we started at 7 o'clock, then a half an hour before that, people put their name in the hat. And we take a maximum of 10 names out of the hat. And those 10 people tell a story. So you want to get there, put your name in the hat. If you've got a story, time it, keep it to the time limit. Now, if you go on our website, azstoryslam.com, all the information's there about the rules, the guidelines, everything else. If you have any questions, my phone number's on there, my email's on there. Give me a call, email me, I'll let you know if you got any questions at all. But when we do our slam on the 8th, and if there are any subsequent ones after that, anybody is eligible to come up, and we'll have a prize for that particular slam too. Not sure what it is, but it'll be some sort of prize that the Phoenix Arts Center is going to provide us with. So once again, I thank you very much for your attention. Thank all the tellers, and thank Neil and Fatima for allowing us this opportunity.
We organized this in two parts, but they're actually connected. And again, it's about stories and storytelling. So we are very, very grateful to have in our midst midst tonight, helping us facilitate this, a true storyteller and culture warrior herself, Fatima Halim. So all of you know her for her fine work across the valley. About vital voices, and we all came with something to share, and she's going to lead us in this effort to share and to tell stories. So thank you, Fatima.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Mark and the storytellers, and Sean and Sandy and Brian. Thank you so much. This is a perfect venue for storytelling because it's very, very intimate. And stories, as you'll see, are very intimate, very, very personal. So what we're going to do is I want us to get in a circle. If we could, those who are outside of the circle, for anybody who know me, Felicia, you know I'm a circle woman. Everything happens in a circle. The energy will now flow. I want the young ladies come on, Amber, Sydney, and
Just go ahead.
create this circle. I'll take this with here. It's going to be very personal, very private. The name of this series is Vital Voices. And the reason why it's Vital Voices is because Dr. Lester, who is one of the founding fathers of this series, realizes how important it is for everyone to be heard. For everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has a story to tell. Let me see you, sweetie, because I know you have some stories. Come in so I can see your beautiful face. Come on, baby. Come in. Sis. Listen. Excuse me? Oh, yeah. Definitely. Asante, you crazy? Come on, Asante. Right here. Come over here, Asante. Sit next to Sydney. And Miss Matthews? Just, there's a space right there. Okay, good. All right. We good? Okay. So, hopefully you got some kind of energetic. I know I did. The stories that were told truly resonated with me because I could see myself in each of those stories in one way or another. And that's what storytelling is all about. Storytelling is about sharing. It's about giving your experiences, talking about your experiences. It's about teaching lessons. Now, what is the one thing that you all found that each of these storytellers had in common? The one thing that they had in common with their stories. They were not even I'm sure they did. I'm going to tell you, I won't put you on the spot like that. They talk about their life experience, right? These were personal stories. Now, you have stories where sometimes you have folks talk about stories from the Bible, or storytellers will tell stories of folk tales. So there are different types of stories. But because we're talking about vital voices, we want to hear your story. Now, this is a circle. And what happens in this circle is like Vegas. What goes on in this circle stays in this circle. If you want to talk about what happened in this circle, talk about what happened to you in the circle, all right? Because we want to feel comfortable about speaking our truth. Because this is what this is all about. This is about telling our stories. It's about speaking our truth. It's about sharing a part of who we are, sharing our experiences. So I would like to know if there is anyone, first of all, that want to talk about the stories that you heard. Because I thought that they were very poignant stories, very, very provocative. As funny as they were very thought-provoking. So does anyone have anything that they want to say to the storytellers, or any experience, or anything that you felt from the stories that you heard this evening?
I can say the story of the little boy and the grandfather in the trunk. It reminded me of my father. We traveled, he was in the military, and we did a lot of road trips as a family. And the stories he told about his experience, he was from South Carolina, by way of North Carolina. And when he told those stories, you could actually see those characters that were there. So, your nephew and his grandfather, your father-in-law, I could see that story.
We're not so different after all, huh?